The hallway was loud with teasing again, like always. The protagonist quietly walked forward, pretending not to hear, but the words still hurt. Every day felt the same: unwanted attention, jokes, and bullying. His glasses, old and taped up, slipped down his face again. When he adjusted them, he paused and turned, boldly raising his middle finger in response. The mocking boy grew furious, shouting and calling him worthless. Suddenly, green energy gathered in the boy's hands, something unusual in their world. Without warning, he threw it at the protagonist, and the force slammed him hard against the wall. His body hit it like a broken doll, and a cloud of dust filled the air. A few students watched from a distance, some curious, others shocked. A girl rushed over to help, but when she saw who it was, she backed away immediately, embarrassed to even be seen near him. Her friends laughed, and she quickly made excuses, blushing with shame. The moment passed like he was invisible again. As the dust cleared, the protagonist slowly stood, picking up his broken glasses. One side had snapped off again. He muttered in frustration, just another thing falling apart. It was the last day of school, a day most students felt emotional about. Groups were chatting, laughing, crying, sharing memories. But he didn't feel connected to any of it. He didn't say goodbye to anyone, and no one looked his way. Instead of staying like the others, he walked straight home. His place was small, a single-room apartment with barely enough space for a bed and desk. There was a built-in TV, but he never paid much attention to it. He had learned to live quietly, keeping himself busy. His life wasn't about fun or friends, it was about surviving every single day. And even on the final day of school, that didn't change. As the protagonist slowly opened his eyes, everything felt heavy, his head ached, and his body was sore. He reached up, checking if he was hurt, but found no real injury. His glasses were on the floor, damaged with only one lens, yet out of habit, he put them on. Strangely, his vision became blurry with the glasses on, not without them. Confused, he removed them and ran a quick test. Drawing the letter A on the wall, he stepped back until he touched the far wall, and he could still see it clearly. After a lifetime of poor eyesight, his vision was suddenly perfect. That strange improvement triggered a rush of memories. He remembered the book from before he passed out. But now it was missing. He searched every corner of his room, becoming more and more frantic. Something this important couldn't just vanish. In his confusion, he even joked about how socks go missing, but this wasn't some ordinary thing, it was a mysterious book. As he tried to remember what happened, the last thing he saw flashed in his mind, the book floating midair and some words he didn't quite understand. It was like a message, a system message. Suddenly, as if answering his thoughts, something appeared right in front of his eyes. It wasn't a dream, it was real. A glowing screen displayed information about him like an old video game. It listed his level, experience, health, and physical stats, everything organized and crystal clear. He stared in disbelief. There were tabs too. Just by thinking about them, the screen responded, switching to the Skills tab. But everything there was locked, hidden behind gray panel. He couldn't access anything yet. So he moved on to the Shop tab, but that too was locked until he reached level 10. The war between humans and the Dalki had left behind a fragile peace, but no one truly believed it would last. Tension filled the air, and fear lingered in the hearts of the people. Due to this uneasy calm, it was made compulsory for every young person to attend military school for 2 years. People knew deep down that the Dalki, with their hunger for control and power, couldn't be trusted. Conflicts between the two races still made the headlines every day, and everyone sensed that another clash could break out at any moment. The protagonist, preparing to leave, rushed to the bathroom. After drinking too much water, he couldn't wait any longer. As soon as he stepped outside, something unexpected happened. He saw a strange message pop up in front of his eyes. It said that his body was being affected by sunlight, and because of it, all his abilities were cut in half. Suddenly, he felt exhausted, as if he had just finished a long, tough run. His body became heavy, and even simple movements felt difficult. He froze for a moment, confused and struggling to understand what was happening to him. The officer escorting him, Sergeant Griff, gave him a suspicious look. He had seen many students hesitate or try to escape, so he remained alert. But the protagonist had no such thoughts. He wasn't planning to run away, he was simply shocked to see his body stats drop on the screen in front of him. His strength, stamina, agility, and health had all taken a big hit just because of the sunlight. Before he could react, another message appeared. It offered him a new daily task: avoid direct sunlight for 8 hours. If completed, he would receive some experience points. That gave him a bit of hope. The task was simple, and if he could keep doing these quests, he might be able to grow stronger. He thought maybe, like in the games he'd heard of, earning enough points would let him improve his physical abilities. While he was thinking about all this, the sergeant barked at him to hurry up. The warning snapped him out of his thoughts, and he quickly made his way to a large bus waiting nearby. As he stepped inside, he noticed it was already packed with others, all heading to the same destination as him. Long ago, when humans first began awakening special abilities, they discovered that not all powers were equal. Some were incredibly strong, while others were barely noticeable. To keep things organized, a power level system was created. It had 8 main levels, level 1 being the weakest and level 8 being the strongest. Each level was divided further into smaller steps like 1.1 to 1.9 to show slight improvements within each stage. There were only 2 ways for someone to gain these powers. One was through something called an ability book. When a serious conflict broke out between humans and a fierce race known as the Dalki, people began sharing knowledge about their powers. They started writing down how they had gained them and turned those writings into ability books. These books became available to the public, but only up to level 5. Stronger books were kept by the military and large organizations, hidden from everyday people. The second way to gain an ability was by being part of a special family, people known as originals. These were the first ones who discovered certain powers and passed them down only to their family members. They refused to share their secrets with the world, and their abilities were often stronger than level 8, so powerful that no one knew how to measure them. Because of this system, the protagonist had always remained at the lowest level. He had no family to help him, no background of power, and definitely no ability book. His family had never possessed any kind of ability, so he wasn't from an original bloodline either. For him, staying weak had become a sad reality. But everything changed the day he got a strange book. At first, he thought it was just another ability book, but something about it felt different. Years passed, and now it seemed like this book had finally given him a power, though he couldn't tell what kind or how strong it was. When he looked at his wristwatch that measured power levels, it still showed he was only at level 1. Oddly enough, everyone else's watches showed the same. Soon after, a strict man named Griff stood before the group of students and began calling out names in groups of 5. These students were being transported somewhere to be tested. The protagonist felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this test would prove that he had changed, that his level had increased. But then an alert popped up. You are being hit by direct sunlight. All stats will be halved. He didn't even know if 10 points in strength, agility, and stamina was considered good, but judging by how he felt before, it must have been close to the peak of what a normal human could reach. Now though, his body felt heavy, his energy drained, and his mind foggy. Heat wrapped around him like a burning blanket, and sweat poured from his body like a waterfall. Thankfully, he had drunk plenty of water earlier, or he would have collapsed from exhaustion by now. Just then, a voice came from nearby. "Hey, are you okay?" a stranger asked kindly. That stranger stood out with his slick blonde hair and sharp hazel-green eyes. As the names of the selected students echoed through the air, the chosen ones began stepping forward. The atmosphere was tense, and among them, one seemed far more nervous than the rest. A boy with a small frame and jittery movements kept glancing around. His name was Peter. With his glasses and untidy brown hair, he looked quite timid, so much so that the protagonist couldn't help but see a bit of himself in the boy. The other 2 were girls. One of them, Layla, stood tall with short brown hair and carried something unusual, a bow slung across her back. That instantly caught the protagonist's attention. In a world where most relied on powers, using weapons was rare. Only a group called Pure preferred weapons over abilities, believing powers had ruined mankind. They were few in number and mostly existed in stories. Meeting someone like Layla was unexpected. Then there was Erin. She was strikingly beautiful, flawless figure, golden silky hair, and an aura that naturally drew attention. But she had a cold presence. Her face showed no emotion, not even as she walked through a sea of staring eyes. While others admired her, she remained unaffected, giving nothing away. As the group walked forward, the protagonist noticed none of them seemed to know each other. It seemed like this group had been selected intentionally, perhaps to avoid friendships or previous bonds interfering in the test. Soon, they halted behind another group that was about to be sent for evaluation. Vorden, with his usual charm, approached each member of their group with a warm handshake. He was friendly and confident, managing to ease the tension until he reached Erin. She didn't even flinch at his offered hand, just looked at it and then turned her head away coldly. Trying to lighten the mood, Vorden placed his hand gently on her shoulder. But that turned out to be a serious mistake. Erin reacted instantly, grabbing his wrist and twisting it hard. Ice began forming on his hand, spreading rapidly as she froze his limb without hesitation. The students around them watched with excitement, murmuring in amazement. "Is that an ice ability? That's a rare one. I wouldn't mind being frozen by her." The situation was quickly becoming chaotic until the instructor, Griff, shouted at them to stop. "Save that energy for the test," he ordered. Aaron let go, and Vorden stumbled back, his face red with embarrassment and his hand slowly returning to normal. Standing behind the protagonist, he mumbled, still shocked, "Can you believe her? I almost lost my hand." The situation felt silly to the protagonist. He already knew that the instructors had all his records from his past school, including the fact that he never had any special ability. But even with that in mind, he was torn inside, unsure of what to do next. Before coming here, he had done his own research. He learned that the military gave a basic ability book to students who didn't have any powers. And that book always taught the same skill, one based on Earth. This was part of a bigger plan. The military gave this ability so the students would feel thankful and loyal. And since the military controlled most of the advanced Earth books, students would have no choice but to stay loyal if they ever wanted to grow stronger. The system was built to bind people with power in exchange for obedience. At one point, the protagonist had seriously considered accepting that path. The Earth ability, while not flashy, was useful, especially for jobs like construction. It seemed like a safe and smart choice for someone like him. But things had changed. He already had a power now, even if no one else knew it. And the truth was, someone who already had an ability couldn't learn a new one. That meant the book the military offered him would be completely useless. And even more troubling, if he took the book, the teachers would expect him to show Earth powers. They'd be watching him closely, and one mistake could expose his secret. Taking a deep breath, he made a bold choice. "I don't have an ability," he said out loud. The hooded man beside the instructor handed over the ability book as expected. He accepted it at first, but right then, a strange message popped up in front of him. Unable to learn this ability, and then another one surprised him. "Would you like to convert the book into 10 EXP? He had seen something like this coming, but the offer of gaining experience caught him off guard. It was tempting, really tempting, but he knew that if the book went missing, someone would definitely notice and start asking questions. So instead, he made another bold move. He handed the book back and simply said, "I'm sorry, but I don't want it." Everyone around him was stunned. No one had ever refused the ability book before. The instructor, who had been doing this job for 5 years, had never faced anything like this. She stepped away from the group and spoke quietly into her earpiece, trying to get advice on what to do next. On the other end, a mysterious man told her, "Let him take the test." That same man, sitting somewhere far away, studied the boy's records. Nothing unusual, no signs of connections to any major group, no powers listed. Everything about him seemed ordinary. Yet, something about the boy caught his interest. "Let's see how long you can survive in this cruel world," he said quietly to himself. And back on the field, the instructor ended her call and turned back toward the students. The test continued with Layla stepping up, carrying a unique weapon, a bow crafted from the body parts of a beast. Unlike any traditional bow, this one was black, resembling a weapon made of gems. The bow string was made of a special material, marking it as a beast weapon. Beast weapons were created using parts from powerful creatures encountered on other planets, and they offered unmatched strength. This was Quinn's first time witnessing such a weapon, and he was amazed by Layla's skill, especially for someone so young. When the test began, Layla quickly displayed her prowess. 5 targets appeared across the field, and with impressive speed, she shot 5 arrows at once. The arrows split in midair, hitting each target at the same time, all thanks to her telekinetic ability. Despite having a weaker telekinetic power, she made the most of it by combining it with her beast weapon. It was clear to Quinn that beast weapons could turn even weak abilities into powerful ones. However, Layla struggled in the strength and agility tests. Her attempt to enhance her punches using her ability didn't help much, and her score was modest. When it came to avoiding holographic spikes, Layla struggled again, failing to use her ability effectively, earning the same score as Quinn. The instructor rated her as a level 2 user, which clearly disappointed Layla, but Quinn noticed that, with her beast weapon, she could have easily outperformed users with higher levels. Next up was Erin, who walked confidently to the field. She quickly displayed her ice abilities by creating and launching ice spears at incredible speed, hitting all targets with precision. The next test saw her summon a massive ice column that struck the drum with incredible force, reaching a score of 50. Erin was clearly a powerhouse. When faced with the final test, Erin avoided the spikes with ease but was eventually hit as the machine sped up. Still, her final score was the highest yet, a power level of 5. Finally, it was Vorden's turn. He approached the field, winking at Quinn, and confidently declared, "Time to show you what I've got." To everyone's surprise, Vorden replicated Erin's ice ability and performed just as well, impressing everyone around him. He proudly displayed his own score of 5, leaving Quinn stunned. What was Vorden's true ability? After seeing Vorden's impressive performance on the test, the protagonist couldn't help but wonder about Vorden's unique ability. When Vorden shook his hand, the protagonist felt that something strange had happened. Vorden's ability seemed to have failed, yet the protagonist couldn't figure out why. If Vorden's power was ice, then surely his hand should have frozen unless the protagonist had some ability to block others' powers. But that seemed highly unlikely. Even Vorden seemed puzzled by the incident, asking the protagonist about his ability as if he knew something had gone wrong. Curiosity stirred within the protagonist, and he started to think deeply about Vorden's behavior. He realized that Vorden had been so insistent on shaking everyone's hand even after Aaron had refused. It seemed odd at the time, but now the protagonist understood. There had to be a connection between the touch and Vorden's ability. The last person the protagonist had touched was Aaron, and now it seemed clear that Vorden's power was to copy others' abilities. The only reason it hadn't worked on the protagonist was that his power wasn't straightforward. Unable to contain his curiosity, the protagonist asked Vorden if he had the ability to copy power. Vorden smiled, surprised by how quickly the protagonist had figured it out. He revealed that the protagonist was right, but he didn't elaborate further. Instead, the protagonist asked if Vorden was an original, someone from a family that kept their powers secret. Vorden's wink confirmed it, revealing that he was indeed an original, someone with immense power, likely surpassing the normal level 8 abilities. Once the test was over, a hooded man teleported the students to the front of the academy. The academy was enormous, towering over the city like a giant complex. A group of 10 teachers stood in front of the building, waiting for the students. As the students waited for their turn, the protagonist noticed how the mid-level students tried to mingle with the higher levels, while the lower levels were left out. The protagonist and Peter were the only level 1 students, and it seemed like they were being ignored by the others. However, just as the protagonist started to feel the weight of the situation, a familiar voice called out to him. It was Vorden, calling him over to join him and Peter. Vorden's presence was comforting, and the three of them stuck together as they followed the teacher, Dell, on a tour of the academy. They were shown the battle arena, classrooms, sports rooms, and various facilities. The protagonist wasn't very interested in most of the places, but he was drawn to the library, which was known for its rare books that weren't available to the public. He hoped to find something that could shed light on his ability. The tour finally ended outside the dorms, where the students were assigned their rooms. The protagonist and Vorden discovered that they had been assigned the same room, and Vorden excitedly suggested that it was fate. The protagonist wasn't sure, but he couldn't deny that their paths had crossed for a reason. With the afternoon free to explore, the students began to settle into their new home, but the protagonist couldn't shake the feeling that something more awaited him at the academy. There was still much to discover, especially about his own abilities. As he looked around, he wondered what the future held for him and the strange connections forming around him. After settling into his room, the protagonist found some free time and decided to make the most of it. The room he was assigned had 2 other occupants, and to his surprise, both were familiar faces. One was calm and confident, the other a bit shy and reserved. Although the 3 beds were spaced out, the room itself felt empty, almost like a reminder that students here weren't meant to relax. This place was built for training, growth, and discipline, no room for fun or comfort. The quiet one, slowly warming up to the group, mentioned he still had unpacking to do and told them to go ahead. The protagonist, always curious, shared his plan to visit the library. He expected the idea to sound boring, but the confident one, always unpredictable, jumped in with his usual humor, claiming he couldn't even remember the last time he'd touched a book. They laughed, the kind of light moment that builds unseen bonds, and headed off together. The library was alive with students already hard at work. Round tables were neatly arranged across the floor, each with a mysterious glowing orb at its center. It wasn't just for decoration, it had a function. When touched, it created a soundproof space around the table, allowing private conversations without disturbing others. The confident one explained it like it was common knowledge for those from elite backgrounds, but to the protagonist, it was new and fascinating. Technology really had come far. They picked a table where 2 other students were already seated and soon realized the orb worked perfectly. The 2 across from them chatted freely, but not a single word could be heard until someone stepped beyond the orb's range. The protagonist immediately dove into the shelves, grabbing every book he could find related to abilities. He read one after another, flipping through pages with quiet intensity. But disappointment followed each turn. These books listed every known ability out there, but not a single one resembled his own. It was as if he didn't belong to any known category. While he searched for answers, the confident one casually browsed a random fiction book but couldn't help glancing over at his friend. He had noticed a pattern. The protagonist wasn't reading for fun. He was searching. And whatever he was trying to find clearly mattered a lot. His curiosity pushed him to ask what exactly he was looking for. The protagonist stared at the message on his screen, reading it again and again. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Just from reading a fantasy book, he had gained experience points. That didn't seem possible. Still, he had to be sure. So he picked up another fantasy novel, this one about dragons, and read the key parts quickly. But nothing happened. No reward, no message. Then he tried a different book, one that also mentioned creatures like vampires. Again, no reaction. After trying several books, he came to a conclusion. Maybe the earlier reward was just delayed. Maybe it wasn't about the specific book at all, but how much knowledge he had gathered over time. Even then, a part of him felt uneasy. What if the book that gave him experience was connected to his strange system? He didn't want to believe that, but the thought stayed with him.